managed to come on stage carrying so much stuff. I need to get better at doing this. I'll leave it all behind as well when I'm done. Thank you, Lisa. Welcome everyone to this session on starting up on a shoestring. My name is Lynn. I work for Santander Business, and I'm part of our breakthrough team that delivers amazing activity across the UK, helping businesses from idea stage right the way through to high growth. So whether it's about meeting fellow entrepreneurs, learning new skills, sharing the pains you might have about a business, we will help you in that journey. And as you might have heard, if you heard Susan's speech this morning, we've partnered with the British Library for the next 3 years so that we can reach out and help more founders like you. I was really keen when we first started talking about this year's Startup Day, I was really keen that we did a session on taking a lean approach to starting a business. So we know how hard it is to kickstart your ideas. Covering the costs you'll incur from the beginning can feel like a huge barrier to overcome, actually. But on the flip side, we've also read the stories about businesses who've gone out and they've secured funding from the beginning. And actually, we heard some stories earlier on of businesses who've, raised substantial amounts of investment. But starting a business doesn't have to be costly. And in this session, we're going to look at some practical ways to help you think about how you can manage your budget and keep those costs down. So when starting a business, whatever that budget is, it's never going to seem quite enough. When you're starting out on a truly small scale, it can be really hard to know what to prioritise, hard to know how to juggle the time, the resources, the skills, the money that you will have to invest in your business to get it off the ground. And I say this not just as a business advisor, which is effectively what I am at Santander, but as somebody who has had experience of starting a business. And it is going back a few years, and it's making me feel really old talking about this, but I'm going to share the experience with you, because I started my first business back in the late 90s in Liverpool. It was in fashion, designing and manufacturing streetwear. I feel really old saying streetwear. I don't even know if streetwear is still a thing, but that's what I was doing 20 years ago. And I sold that to independent retailers across the UK and internationally, actually quite quickly. And when I think back to those early days, there are 3 things that spring to mind. Actually, there are 4, because the first thing that springs to mind is it was really hard work. It was really hard work. So I feel exactly how you are feeling now. But the first thing that popped into my head was that there was actually an abundance of funding back then. And I'm talking about startup funding. So I could get grants for equipment. I could get grants to attend trade shows. I think there were probably grants to help me apply for other grants. I mean, that's how crazy the landscape was back then. And that idea of seeking investment just wasn't a thing. It wasn't what anybody within my peer network was talking about. And so I funded my business through a combination of some grants. That would be crazy if I hadn't secured any. A little bit of money from family. So I went down that classic friends, family and fools route that I'm sure some of you will have heard of. I managed to get a startup loan from the Prince's Trust, so another great organisation supporting startups, and amazingly an overdraft, which when I think about it is quite shocking because I had no money to my name whatsoever, but I did manage to get an overdraft. And I do think the landscape has changed. I do think there is still an amazing source of funding out there, but I would be crazy to say that it's not actually a little bit harder to get. And we might touch on some of that today. And maybe those are, you might have some questions that you want to ask on that when we get to that stage. I think secondly, the fact that, every corner that I turned, there was an organisation that could give me business advice. And that was great. So, someone to help me write my business plan. Worse, someone to write my business plan for me. Please don't do that. Someone to help me with my financial forecasting, someone to help me because I was in the creative industries. And it was great, but actually I didn't know who to turn to for help. I didn't know who was going to give me the quality advice that I was looking for. So one of the things, of course, that I love about the British Library is the fact that they can be your one-stop shop for that advice. You can trust them. You will get good quality from them, and they will signpost you to the organisations that can help you, organisations that perhaps you sit here at the moment and don't even know exist. But the third thing that popped into my head was that the barriers to entry when I launched my business were actually pretty high. So, for example, I wanted to launch a website for my business because, websites were actually still quite new in the late 90s. But I needed a website because I wanted to have an online catalogue for my retailers, and I wanted to start selling directly to the public. That website was going to cost me tens of thousands of pounds, and I think it was something like 6 months of development work to launch. And it never happened. I could never make that investment into my business. In the late 90s, it was pre-social media. I'm so old. Pre-social media, no Twitter, no Instagram, no Facebook. These things didn't exist. So actually, for me to reach my audience, my consumers, the wearers of my clothing, I had to attend trade shows. I used to go to the clothes show in Birmingham every year, if anyone remembers that. We'd send out hundreds of catalogues. We used to send out loads of freebies to stylists in the hope that that stylist would pass it on to somebody who would then wear it on the telly. So instead now of you sending things to influencers and it being instantly on Instagram, I have a distinct memory of sending some printed work that we'd done to a stylist. And Kat Deely, does anybody remember Kat Deely? Kat Deely wore it on the telly one Saturday morning. So I've got a video recording of Kat Deely. Like, how on earth do you get a video recording shared on Instagram? Like, you just can't do these things. So it felt like everything that we needed to do to raise the awareness of the business and to accelerate the growth of the business actually required quite a lot of investment. If we fast forward to 2019, we're now in this wonderful digital world where, you could, if you weren't that interested in what we're talking about, you could probably go online on your smartphones and get yourself an e-commerce website set up that might cost you 50 quid a month. You'll be selling by the end of the day. You don't have to have any coding skills, but you've got a live business. Oh, that's incredible. It was going to cost me like 40 grand and you could do it for, less than 100 easily. You've got all of these wonderful social media tools at your disposal. You could take a picture of a product as it comes off the production line on your smartphone, add a filter to it, get it on Instagram, and instantly be engaging with your audience, which I just think is amazing. So you have these tools at your disposal that just, they weren't around, they weren't around 20 years ago, they weren't around some of them 15 years ago. But I think because you do have that now, business models are evolving, and it does make me jealous. There's a little bit of me which is, shall I relaunch that streetwear brand? I might have to call it something else, but shall I give it another go? So I'm not suggesting that you've got it easy, but I honestly think there's no time like the present to give this a go. I'd encourage you not to get too distracted by seeking funding from the very, very beginning. I think it can become a distraction. And that's not to say that you'll need financial help. That's not to say there's some of you in the audience that will definitely need to get some investment to be able to launch what you want to do. But I think being savvy from the beginning does a number of things. I think it builds value into your business from day one, which is really important. It gives you the chance to develop a whole range of business skills that you might not have today, but you're going to develop over time. And it instills that money mindset from the very, very start, and that will stand you in incredibly good stead as you launch and develop your business. So enough from me. That was probably a longer introduction I intended. And I better not put that down or I'll lose track of what I'm doing. We've got a wonderful panel with us this afternoon that are going to talk to you about their businesses. I've got a number of questions that I'm going to pose to them. We're going to then open up to the audience. So as they're talking, if you just want to start making a note of the questions that you want to ask, and we'll get onto those shortly. Firstly, we have Alice Mayer. Alice is founder of We Built This City on a mission to revolutionise, get the word out, London souvenirs. Next, we have Sam Colwil, founder of Bathrooms by Design. And I'm going to quote this, Sam, because I took this from your website. On a mission to improve people's homes, health and well-being with beautiful, affordable and expertly designed bathrooms that will stand the test of time.
Absolutely.
Anyone's in the market for a new bathroom, you know who to come to. And finally, we have Pip Murrary, founder of Pip Nut, obsessed with making the tastiest nut butters on the market, Pip. So let's hear a little bit more about these businesses. Alice, if I can start with you, and if you can tell us about your wonderful store.
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I run We Built This City, which is currently a 3-floored store at the end of Carnaby Street, opposite Enter Liberty. If anyone's wandering around soon, come and say hello. We are on a mission to revolutionise London souvenirs, and we do that by bringing together the very best art, gift souvenirs from London's creative community. So I started it 5 years ago in 2014. I had the idea because I used to work with artists through lots of different roles, things like PR, and ended up working for an online company actually that aggregated artists. And it was just post-Olympics when London was becoming very expensive and very valuable to a lot of people. And the gap in the market that I noticed was that essentially artists were getting pushed out. They were having to become business people themselves, which seemed a shame because I kind of feel that London is full of marketeers. And why is it that the creative community has to become, their own boss, as it were? They should just be able to get on and make brilliant things. So what I wanted to do was really find them new audiences. That was my main mission. And then I was sailing along one day and had a light bulb moment when I looked into one of those slightly below par souvenir stores that we all see around London, and looked in and thought, gosh, this is all quite an outdated, cliched idea of what London is these days. It's very expensive. None of it's made here. It's made in the Far East. It doesn't support London's creative community. And having worked with artists, I realised that they make things regularly around London because they live here, they work here, they're inspired by it. So I put it all together as an idea and took it to a couple of different locations in London to try and see if I could get support for the idea and take it to a street like Carnaby. There's a whole story which is, I might as well say it because it's madness, but I took the idea to, I found my way in finally to a meeting with Carnaby, and they actually offered me a pop-up shop to test it back in 2014 before Christmas. But because of timings and all sorts of things, they offered it with a 3-week period to turn what was an idea on a keynote presentation into a business in 3 weeks. So actually the pop-up opened in 3 weeks. And there was no money because there wasn't really a fully formed idea. It was just, it's worth me saying that because that's probably why I'm on this panel, because I didn't have money to begin with, and it's been quite an adventure since. So we started as pop-up. We then went to a permanent store about 2 years in because it works on Carnaby and the landlord's happy, and we took on a lease, and then we're still there now. But we also now have an online store, so we ship all of our artist goods all over the world. And we also do consultancy behind the scenes for other London-based organisations who want to work with creatives to make brilliant merchandise about the city. So we work with Battersea Power Station, Eurostar, Google, lots of people. And so it's a 3-pronged attack. And I would say that it is a limited company, but effectively we operate really as a social enterprise because every penny goes back in order to continue to fund what we're doing as a platform that's really on a mission as opposed to just a retailer.
Fantastic, thank you. And yeah, an absolutely perfect story in terms of starting up on a shoestring.
Oh yeah.
But also with no time at all to do that.
No time,
so
no money.
We'll revisit that. Fantastic. Yeah. Sam, can you talk a little bit more about your business?
Yes, thank you. So Bathrooms by Design, we're a 3-store retailer based in London. We've got an online presence, so I think these days you call it omni-channel, where customers can go into a store and then go online and sort of have a bit of a mix and match as to how they interact with you. So we've got our online store, but over the last couple of years we've tried to find ways to make the customer journey a little bit more engaging, a little bit more unique. So we've been investing in our own 3D design software. We've also got a VR app which is available to download, so please get your phones out and download it now. We've got a real push towards using technology to help customers buy bathrooms. And we've also got a huge growth ambitions to expand beyond London. So we've got a franchise concept which we're developing throughout the UK, and we're bringing in our own products, which is allowing us to have a bit of a competitive advantage. So other retailers in our industry, there's some quite high profile brands, which is quite saturated, and the market has become a race to the bottom over the last couple of years. Just this year, 2 of the biggest 3 retailers have gone into administration. So there's some big problems in the industry, and we're doing what we can to, I guess, protect ourselves from what might come over the next couple of weeks, the next couple of months, with whatever the politicians decide to do with our country.
Don't say that word.
Yeah, I told myself not to say it. How I started was, so my dad's been in the industry had been in the industry for 30 years. He'd had various successes and failures. I'd worked summer jobs, weekend jobs in his warehouses, in his showrooms. I think at one point he had 4 or 5 stores in London. And got to know the industry a little bit and got to understand what worked for him, what didn't work for him. And back in 2006, he'd had a period of tough trading and essentially had lost all of his stores over a period of 3 or 4 years. And one summer I was there during a phase where he'd lost his last store. So I got to see sort of what was going wrong, what mistakes were being made. And it got to a stage where he was unable to continue trading, had a lockup of stock that was sitting there ready to be sold as a job lot. Now, when I left college, I had my first job was working in a phone shop, and after a couple of months I thought, I just can't do this. I can't work for someone, I can't be managed, I can't be told what to do. So I set up a little eBay store, and luckily for me, my friend's dad had a DVD store, and he was importing surround sound systems, and he had lots of DVDs. So I sort of became the DVD guy down the pub that was selling them for sort of 3 for a tenner, and doing whatever I could to earn a bit of extra cash. I then started selling his surround sound systems on eBay. Started going to auctions to buy TVs, just anything to make money so I didn't have to work for anyone. And I gradually went from full-time at this phone shop to part-time to working 1 day a week to not having to work for them at all. So it was, I guess, started off as a side hustle, then turned into something I could do full-time. And then while this was going on, my dad's business was going under. So one day we sort of got together and decided that my eBay store would stop selling electronics and start selling bathrooms. So that's kind of how I got into the industry. I didn't have a big sort of why mission, and I didn't sort of have this big passion for bathrooms. It was almost a case of, why not?
Really?
But then I learned the passion, and I sort of immersed myself in the industry. I started going to exhibitions, started flying around Europe to go to factories to see how the products were getting made, and I became a bit of an anorak, and just sort of turned a bit of I guess, an accident into something that I wanted to sort of pledge my career into. So, yeah, that's
fantastic.
That's
And you talk about the side hustle, and I suspect there's quite a lot of people in the audience who at the moment have got that side hustle that they're thinking about turning into full-time, so that's maybe something we'll revisit, unless I go off on my tangents, which is likely. Pip, can you tell us a little bit about how we've all come to have Pip and Nut butters in our cupboards?
Sure. Hi, I'm Pip. So I founded Pip and Nut it launched just over 5 years ago now, but I started the business 7 years ago. I, on the other hand, was a complete peanut butter addict. I am, and still am, one of those people that spoons it straight out of the jar and forgets the toast. So it's totally normal and acceptable thing to do if that's what you do. But we're an all-natural nut butter brand, so we don't have any palm oil in any of our products. That was one of the main reasons for wanting to start the brand up. But we're also really kind of natural, so there's nothing in our products that you wouldn't recognise from your own store cupboard. So I started the brand because of my love of the product. I mean, for me, I was doing loads of marathon running at the time, and I spotted a kind of gap in the market, because when I was shopping this category in the supermarkets, I kind of started to get a bit disheartened by the fact that every single product I picked up had palm oil in there, and a lot of them had loads of sugars, and I felt just wasn't doing it justice as a product goes, and that you could simplify it, make it much more natural. And I remember going over to the US and seeing that almond butters as well were huge over there, but they just hadn't translated into the UK market. And I think when you sometimes focus, or if any of you starting a food brand or thinking about it, I think you can go about it one of two ways. You can either create a product that is going to create a whole new category like coconut water, which didn't exist 5 years ago in the UK, or you can reinvent one that already exists. And that's what I did, was really trying to bring life into what is a rather dull space in the supermarket, the spreads category. But I started up having absolutely no experience. So at the time I was working at the Science Museum as a theatre producer. So working very much in the creative sector, had no knowledge of what a P&L was, let alone stood for, and learnt the ropes through doing. It took a couple of years to set up the brand, and I'm a classic kitchen tabletop to supermarket journey, in the sense that I bought a blender, packed them into jars at my weekends, and I'd go down to Maltby Street Market in Bermondsey to trial out the products. And I did that for a number of months to get a bit of a flavour for what it was like to sell a product, whether or not anyone resonated with it, and to kind of give me a bit of a sense on what running a business was like. And I think that for me was a crucial point in my startup journey, was sort of figuring out, is this something that I was going to put my heart and soul into? Which I did. I found a factory about 8 months later, raised actually some funding on Crowdcube, raised about £100,000 in about 9 days on Crowdcube, back when Crowdcube was probably a bit more cowboy back then, and launched the brand about 4 months later after that into Selfridges. And yeah, we've had a fantastic journey since. We're in over 5,000 stores in the UK, every major supermarket now. So it's still very much UK focused, but starting to stretch a little bit overseas. But yeah, I still very much here in the UK at the moment.
Thank you so much. I can't believe we've got such a diverse panel as well in terms of business and backgrounds and passion and everything else. I think it's incredible. Oh, there's so much wealth in these brains that we need to tap into. So we are going to open up to questions shortly, but I just want to start with one or two of my own, if that's okay. And I guess the first one is thinking about if you can remember the moment when you decided to really make a go of it, and what you then thought were your main priorities in getting things moving. And Sam, I was actually going to start with you, because obviously you found yourself with this opportunity with your dad's business. Mm-hmm. I guess there was less of a this is the moment to do it, but more why not? But I'm just wondering what your steps were then afterwards.
Yeah, so there was a few sort of breakfast meetings that I had around my parents' house, and we were sort of talking through what he should be doing, what the family should be doing. He had a lock-up in Richmond, just behind Richmond Fire Station, incredibly cheap rent, and that was where he was holding all his stock. Initially, we were looking for a buyer, just to buy it as a job lot, and that was kind of my role, to find someone that could sell it off. And it was after a couple of weeks that I sort of decided that it'd be worth giving it a good go. At the very least, to sell it all on eBay, because you'd make so much more money out of doing that than selling it as a job lot. So I started doing that, and very quickly, I guess, fell in love with it, and just sort of enjoyed the buzz of. I don't know if anyone uses eBay or has ever sold things on eBay, but you do get an incredible buzz if you've got things on auction, and then in the last minute someone bids on it, and you get a load of money for something that's not worth much to you, picking up dust in the warehouse. And I think the moment was actually when, because I was living just outside of London, commuting every day into this office, and there was a part of the office block which was not being used, and I ended up converting it into a little flat, and I guess that was the moment. So it's like, don't have to pay rent, can live here, can see how things go with the business, and that was it. So I ended up living there for 4 years, managed to sort of build the business up, take stock from other distributors that have redundant stock they wanted to get rid of, and that initially was the business model, was just taking redundant stock, selling it on eBay, and then buying another load of stock. So it was originally called Half Price Bathrooms, but it was all about just moving boxes. There wasn't really much beyond that. Well, I guess when I really took it seriously and thought, yeah, this is the moment where I've got to commit, was 2008. That was financial crash, so everything had been turned upside down in our industry. There was companies going bust. The currency just got shot to pieces, and a lot of our products gets imported from Europe and the Far East. So there were distributors that were in absolute turmoil, and a lot of them went bust. The internet became a huge race to the bottom, and that was where we were selling the majority of our stuff. And I guess the decision we had at the time was, do we try and battle through that, or do we change our business model? And at the time there was a furniture store in Richmond that had recently gone bust, and it's a great location on the main road leading through Richmond. And it was that moment. Do we commit to that store, which was available relatively cheaply, or do we carry on doing what we're doing and potentially not be around to carry on? So we made that decision, and thankfully that was the right decision, and that's when effectively we became Bathrooms by Design.
And a great example of actually taking a business through recession, when they often say that that's the best time to do it as well, because it's harder, but also kind of easier to find those opportunities in a way. So
lots of great deals as well.
Great deals. I'm loving the deals from Sam here. Pip, you talked about the fact that you did you made it at home with your £800 blender. You were taking it to the markets. Did you have a kind of cut-off point where you thought, I'm going to give it so many months at the markets to see what the feedback is, and then I'll make that decision? Or were you kind of just organically seeing how things were going?
Yeah, no, I was quite kind of clear with myself that I would do markets for 3-4 months. For me, it's not, for this particular product, it's not particularly sustainable because you're not making it at enough scale to be able to make enough money from it, essentially. But for me, it was purely to get consumer feedback in like the purest form, which is, do people put money where their mouth is when they try it? And I knew that for me, the kind of brand that I wanted was to have a sort of national supermarket brand. So markets was really just a stepping stone to get there, in terms of to get that test bed. And so I also knew that if I was to scale, or if I was to supply supermarkets, I'd need my manufacturing and supply chain to scale and be set up from day one to be able to supply supermarkets when they hopefully decided to buy it. So I did it for 3 months and was like, right, I think I've got enough feel of this product and enough feedback to be able to then go back to the kitchen, redevelop some of the products, and then go and find a factory. And you can, if you're manufacturing something, either build your own factory or small production facility, or you can find a co-packer or a manufacturer to outsource it to, which is the second route, is what I chose. And so that was probably the hardest bit of starting up, really. And actually, before you do anything, don't do any branding, don't do any of that kind of social media stuff until you really worked out how you can make your product, because it took 8-9 months to find one factory that said yes, and I went and visited what felt like hundreds who all said no. So really only until that point that I actually had a factory that I knew could make it to the quality that I wanted and to the price that I needed did I even bother looking at anything that was like the nice kind of brand element of it. So that's the key bit, I think.
I think a key message, I know we're here to talk about starting up on a shoestring, but that key message about validation, that importance of getting out to who your consumers actually are and checking that they really do want this thing that you are really passionate about, and saving yourself a lot of money in the long run, actually, by taking that approach.
Yeah, and I think there's something really brilliant about trying something at a really small scale, because I think it can feel really intimidating when you're like, right, I want to launch a food product, and then you think, God, how am I going to go about doing that? And actually starting just by getting out the door and making a real product and selling it to someone gives you also that kind of gut feel and kind of excitement that really then drives you further forward to sort it all out. But if you don't do that intermediate stage, it can feel like a huge jump to go from an idea in your head to producing thousands of units in a factory, there's a lot. It's nice to have a kind of intermediate point to validate it.
Yeah. I mean, Alice, you took a similar approach with the pop-up.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we're all aware of, we're all conscious of what pop-ups are now. Maybe not so much actually back when you started. But I love the fact that you had that creativity to try it again before committing to, big long lease.
Yeah.
All that expense that comes with it.
I did a very strange thing actually because I worked for 2 startups, and then the second one, I helped this entrepreneur launch her business. It's The Dots, which is like a LinkedIn for creatives. Pip Jameson, who's, oh my God, an amazing force of nature, taught me everything I know. But and I had that moment where I woke up the next morning and felt really sad, and I didn't know why I felt sad. And it was because I basically helped launch someone else's business again, and I realised in that moment that I needed to do my own. So then I had this 6-month period of really formulating the idea. But then doing a very strange thing and basically wandering around the West End, sort of lurking on weekends, looking at shop units going, I mean, this isn't possible because these, this is 2 long leases, I don't have any money and all of that. So I really got down my intention, or I suppose the first commitment was to test the idea, but really actually to test it in the way that I felt was most valuable. So I could have taken a cheap pop-up down a back street somewhere, maybe even still in the West End, which would have been far, which might have been cheaper or easier. But my sort of boundaries and my kind of, I suppose, my absolutes were essentially, I need to be on a street where if I'm going to do an 8-week or 12-week pop-up, I don't need to fight for PR and marketing to get people through the door. I need organic footfall. And I also wanted to do it somewhere that really made sense of souvenirs. I mean, a lot of people also said to me, why are you trying to set up even physical bricks and mortar? You should be doing online. But with this business, it's about, souvenirs to me are tangible. They're something in the moment. They're an experience themselves. So it had to be physical bricks and mortar. And for me, it had to be putting artists back in the heart of the West End where thousands of people would walk through the door every day. Now, that's not a very easy thing to put upon oneself when setting up a business. But weirdly, I was like determined that was going to happen because I saw a lot of people around that time testing things where at the end of it, they would say, oh, well, we think it worked, but if only we'd been on a slightly better street, or if only we'd not had that huge, So I really wanted to test it. And I kind of thought, if I can get to the end of 8 weeks and say, well, if it doesn't work on Carnaby, then it just doesn't work, then that would be I would get somewhere far quicker and into a better place. So that's why, and this is the other bit of advice I'd love to give, is that, I didn't have any money. So I just thought, well, the best thing also I can think about now is, does this idea also, it works for me because I want to do this, I want to put this out into the world. I think it works for customers, I don't know that yet. But does it work for anyone else? And that's when I started to think, well, places like Carnaby Street are known for cultural and creative heritage, but they don't really have a huge amount of creative stuff going on. So maybe they might want to work with me on this. And then I also thought the same of Covent Garden and a couple of other places. And that is ultimately, I didn't go to the Appear Here's of the world. I didn't go to pop-up marketplaces because actually I think they're very expensive for what they are. And I just thought instead, can I champion this to somebody who will get behind me and support this just as much as, because ultimately this idea is also, it's slightly bigger than me in a way. It's about, filling a space that needs filling. So I would just say that really think about your idea in terms of, who else needs your idea even more than maybe you do? Because sometimes, that's a road in. And I ended up paying far less for that pop-up for those 8 weeks on Carnaby at Christmas time than I could ever have imagined, actually. And it was the most amazing start. So, but only because I drew that boundary and went, no, it has to be this.
You really understood where your market was going to be.
Yeah.
You did that market research with that great session this morning with Mintel, and you kind of really did that.
I did a lot of lurking,
Lurking. Market research or lurking, however you want to describe it, is entirely up to you. We're not fussy. I think that sense, though, of having a limited budget to do what you're wanting to do. I think often we find that we think the solution is we'll need to go out and find some money, but actually sometimes it's about going out and finding like-minded individuals or organisations who can support what you're trying to do in a different way, in that sense of collaborating, in-kind support, just asking for people to help you in different ways.
Yeah, and I think that comes from a really solid belief in your idea. And if you don't have that belief in your idea, then you're going to have lots of other challenges, but it's also, you know, that the belief is the thing that opens up those potential collaborations that.
I'm really keen to open up to the audience. We've got hands going up already. I just want, and I'm going to ask the three of you to answer very, very quickly, and then we'll take some questions. Is just in terms of what your approach is now to how you're financing the next stage of your business. And I know you're all very, very different. So just very quickly, actually, and then we'll go to the first question.
We are looking to expand. I'm not going to say too much because I don't even have a fully formulated plan, but we are looking to expand where we would be taking on investment now. But just to say, over the last 5 years that we have had to plug cash gaps, and we've done that through loans. So we've worked with, we've got a loan from Funding Circle. We've get something called an advance from iZettle if you're in the business where you're going to be taking payments from customers through an iZettle machine. They are able to give you an advance, which is amazing because you don't actually then pay back a lump sum. You pay back off of your future sales. And we've also got an overdraft. So we've used loans, but now we're looking for potential investment, but probably in another 6 months as well.
Thank you. Sam, what about you?
We import a lot of our goods, and our bank has a facility, it's called a letter of credit. So essentially they tell the factory that we're good for the money, and they'll then pay the factory. We effectively get 120 days, so that's really good on cash flow. We're also just about to start using asset finance because we're looking to start manufacturing our own goods. So we've got a 12,000 square foot warehouse in Brentford. And there's an area that we can use to start making our own basins, start finishing our own taps, because taps in the industry are becoming quite popular in different finishes. So we want to start doing that ourselves. And there's some good products that will allow us to get the machinery we need, which on a monthly fee is next to nothing, far smaller than the extra profit it's going to generate. We've got a few little credit cards more for convenience. We try to steer away from credit cards where possible. We don't have an overdraft facility either. But that's been quite recent. Setting up, we didn't really use any kind of funding other than the 1,500 quid I lent off my mum, which I still owe actually.
Yeah, I still owe the money to my family that I borrowed 20 years ago, so don't tell them. They've forgotten about it, I hope. Yeah. Pip, what about you?
Yep, so we use invoice financing where you sell your invoices and get kind of like the money in earlier than what you would from the supermarket paying you directly. And we also have letter of credits as well from our factories to extend our payment terms. But we also have raised a few funding rounds now. Our first funding round through sort of institutional money through a venture capitalist in August closed recently. So raised about 3.5 million, but yeah, in the early days, kept it on a real tight shoestring for the first 2 years before we took significant capital going forwards.
Well, £800 blender. That's exactly.
Yeah.
I think if there's some terms as well that are that we've mentioned on the stage, just to do a plug for my colleagues. I've got colleagues out there in the foyer that can explain a lot of these things to you. So if you're sitting there thinking, I don't know what any of this is, go and have a chat to my colleagues in the red ties outside. Blatant plug. Right, we have our first question down at the front.
Without money, I'm amazed you've done it. That's really good to hear that. But someone is obvious, your father was there. What I want to know if both of you had similar person. I think more than money, in my case, I can live without money, but what I am missing is the knowledge. So how much having your dad other side of the phone, even if it's not next to you, so helped you? And can you advise what we can do? I don't have a dad I can call to. Not big things, for example, simplest thing. Yeah. Shall I rent this office in this location, or shall I rent that office in the other location? Or this company making such a comment, they double charge me for the office. Shall I panic? You know what I mean? So I did. I panicked when they double charged me. I thought there is a fraud going on. So how was this help that there is somebody there for you who knows, even though if he failed, but somebody there for you being there, helped you?
Yeah, it's really important to have a mentor or mentors.
This is true for all of us.
Yeah, and people that you can call on to give you that kind of advice. I learned very quickly to do the opposite of what my dad told me to do, but there's plenty of other people that in his network and just people locally that you can call on. It's the 21st century with the internet the way it is. It's so easy to find people. There's online communities that you can be involved in. There's so many great social sites that you can go on, like Quora, that you can get some amazing answers to most questions that you may have. So I think just being curious online is a great way to start finding your way to the answers that you're seeking. And there's also some organisations that are there to help businesses. Take, for example, HR problems. You can go to ACAS, and they're brilliant at that kind of stuff. British Library are great for research and all kinds of other things. And no doubt there'll be organisations out there to help with looking for premises and supporting you through that. So absolutely.
It's important, isn't it, to have peers that you can say, am I doing the right thing? Am I making the right decision? Is someone taking the mickey out of me? Is someone, did you have those people you could bounce off?
I've got a sort of a WhatsApp group of like food and drink startup founders who are like my peers. That tends to get that stuff. Like literally today, someone was like, "How do people pay what's their HR system that they use?" It's really boring stuff, but the stuff that actually you don't really want to, like, if you just need someone to recommend something that they've used that they can kind of validate. But I do think finding a mentor within your sector who's been there, done that, had a startup ideally, and scaled it, is a really helpful kind of thing, more from a kind of just supporting you on the kind of bigger picture strategic decisions that you need to make as well, because there's the small things which you don't want to bother anyone with, but then there's the big stuff which you kind of want to be like, should we launch into a new market or should we stay here in the UK?
Yeah, it was the same for me. So I bored everyone to tears with the idea for about 6 months. So by the time it launched, I also, because I didn't have any money to do it really, I was having to pull in resource from as many different places as possible. So weirdly, I sort of built this kind of small army that have sort of seen me through. But I did get to a point at the end of year 3 when actually I realised I didn't have peers. I had people who'd run businesses for, say, 30 years, and I had a lot of people who wanted to run businesses, but I didn't have anyone at my level. And actually, this wasn't going to be a plug for the British Library, but I did a scale-up course here, and actually that was amazing because everyone had a similar-sized business and was at the end of the 3 years, and we were all, suddenly I was like, oh my God, there's so much knowledge here that I could draw on. So that really helped. I didn't even know how much that was going to help actually until I got here.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions? Yes, there are hands going up. There is a gentleman there in the grey shirt.
Thanks. Hi there. A question for Pip, actually. In terms of, do you have any advice in terms of food and drink manufacturing, in terms of finding a factory and how to approach them or what to, just any advice to go through that process?
Yeah, it's a funny thing actually, because when you start out on it, you assume that like factories will line up to be your manufacturer because you've got such a great idea, and actually the complete opposite is the case. They absolutely, most of the time, do not want to work for a startup. You've got no volume, you don't know what you're doing, like you're kind of annoying. But the best way routes in, because they don't advertise themselves, you wouldn't, a Google search doesn't really actually bring up the best factories to work with. There are kind of like British, the kind of British Retail Consortium has a website which has a list of factories that you can go to. There are some brilliant trade fairs out there where you can go and trawl sort of private label manufacturers, go and visit there. There's one in Holland which we go to every year to kind of find new factories. I'd say that also use your network as much as possible. So if you know anyone who makes anything, see if they know anyone that might make your product. And then the best thing is, I think, once you start to get into kind of the rabbit warren of trying to find someone that can make your product, if they can't make it, ask them, do they know anyone that could? And you end up hopping from one to the next. So, if that one says no, maybe their recommendation might take you to the next person and just keep going with it, really. But yeah, it just takes a long time, really, and factories are slow to get back to you. And just make sure when you do approach a factory that you've got a really clear view on what your volumes are going to be, and that you're approaching it in a really kind of quite commercial way, I'd say, but also to some extent sort of sell the dream to them as much as possible, dangle the carrot and be like, we're a really exciting up and coming brand, because the only thing you can really offer them, because if your volumes aren't there, is that kind of potential and the opportunity to work with someone that isn't sort of Tesco own label. So yeah, sell the kind of excitement to them is a big one, I think.
Thanks, Pip. Any other questions? There was another hand up at the back somewhere, but yes. Oh, right at the back.
Hi, this is for all three of you, but I reckon that Sam had it cracked from the start. How did you deal with the awful question of salary for yourselves?
Very good question. Did you pay yourselves?
For about 3 years, I was below minimum wage, but I did live in the office, so I was. Yeah. So you do need to make a sacrifice. How long that sacrifice lasts for is, I guess, how quickly you can get up and running. But even when you do, try and be as sensible as possible with salary. I guess it depends on what type of business you've got. Whether you're trying to set up a lifestyle business where you can just live more comfortably and live how you want when you want, maybe travel the world and work on a laptop on a beach, or set up something that you want to generate long-term value. And that, I guess that's a decision I made, is I wanted to generate long-term value, and yeah, be very strict with what I took out of the business.
Alice, how about you?
I'm going to be really honest. So for the first couple of years when we were a pop-up, because of the rate we were on as a pop-up, salary wasn't actually too tricky for me. I mean, it certainly wasn't big, but it was fine to live in London on it. But actually, when we took on a lease, because I got to a point where I needed to establish the business and actually get a permanent address and just settle, because essentially we did, in the first 2 years, we had 6 different pop-ups all on Carnaby Street, because ultimately we were filling gaps for them where retailers were leaving. And I was having to put up shops, destroy them, lose team members, and it was just too much. So then I took on a lease, but we had to pay more for that. And that is actually when it got really hard. So weirdly, I had my toughest year of not paying myself much, actually, in year 3 and year 4. Anyway, now we're in year 5, trying to turn it back around. But and it was a strange thing, because also we went from this big store as a pop-up, or multiple big stores, and then we took on a lease actually on a very small property. So everything got squeezed. It was like 2 years of it, but it was all back to front. So it's a very strange journey of entrepreneurship, I guess, because it doesn't. Yeah, but anyway, but no, it is tough. And I also think that the one thing I've learned is that my mindset about money on a very personal level has also infiltrated the business, because that is, when you run something, you're ultimately projecting onto it all the time. So I've actually had to go on a money workshop in order to change the money coming back to me, because anyway, I'm not going to go into therapy with you all, but basically, I grew up in a very bohemian household where there wasn't a huge amount of money, so I don't expect a lot of money, and actually I quite enjoy working with no money, because I think there's a creativity in there that gets induced, and I feel more comfortable there. But ultimately, it's not a way to live. So yeah, but just a note to say that your own personal, the way that you operate around money can sometimes filter into also your business, and you need to be careful of that. And I can recommend a course if anyone wants to go on one.
I think it's such an important question, because I think we talk about the excitement of, setting up your own business and this, the journey, without sounding too cheesy, that you're going to go on. And actually, sometimes we don't stop and have that conversation around, oh, hold on, am I actually going to pay myself? I didn't for the first couple of years in my business. I don't know how I'm still with my other half. How he put up with me is beyond me, to be honest. But I think sometimes we don't have that honest conversation. No. Pip, did you find that?
So in the 2 years when I was setting it up before the brand officially launched, I just stretched my part-time salary as hard as it could go. And then when I launched, I was under minimum wage as well, and for a couple of years. And then as we hired new people, I basically benchmarked myself, and this is what I still do to this day, against the person the highest person in the company. So obviously when you're hiring just junior people, you're kind of keeping it, because it actually is quite difficult to know as the business starts to then scale, like what is the right amount. And also having investors in the business, it's also another weird conversation to have. So that for me is like a good measure, is like as the business grows and we bring in more talent, like I kind of match my salary. But yeah, in the first couple of years, keep it to a bare minimum. Yeah, live cheap.
I'm conscious that we are eating into break time, Claire. Is that correct? Have we got time for one more question? Up to you. Yes, one more question, if there is one. Oh, we've got suddenly hands are going up now. You two are together. I'm kind of hoping that you're maybe just somehow going to ask the same thing. Maybe fight it out between yourselves as to who wants to ask the question. There we go. It's the first person to grab the mic.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. It's really interesting. And I could differentiate about your products or services. What's the difference between your competence? But for you, Pip, I didn't really get it. Like, what's the difference in your product that makes you really good in it?
Yeah.
So.
Put me on the spot. My USPs. None of our products have palm oil in, which is a really bad form of deforestation. We also are very particular in the sourcing of our ingredients. So, for instance, our peanut butter, we source really particular peanuts from Argentina that taste better. And from a brand positioning as well, we're very playful as a brand. We appeal to a really much younger demographic to our competitor set, which is all down to kind of our brand positioning as well. But effectively, we're an all-natural brand compared to, say, a Sunpat, which is more processed, if you like. Look out for it in store.
I think people are already going out to get their cup of tea, so I think we're going to bring it to a close. Thank you so much, the three of you, for being so honest. Thank you.